I'm Zainab Waibokum, and this is QTV. Today, we are celebrating International Children's Day of Broadcasting in collaboration with UNICEF. And here with me is my co-host.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yehu Abi Bari.
Okay, here's our guest, Mr. Jonathan Lewis. Thanks for coming.
Nice to be here. Congratulations to you, Zainab, and to you, Sehu, for being the principal bearer of news on children's issues on this day. Thank you very much.
You're
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Jonathan Lewis, we have a few questions to ask you.
Sure.
Let me give it to my co-host.
Okay, very good.
The first question we have is, what is the mandate of UNICEF?
Well, that's a great question. That's a really important topic to touch on. And let me just give a little bit of background, because this particular day, the International Children's Day of Broadcasting, it was actually established by UNICEF way back in 1991. And the whole purpose of this day is to allow broadcasters, different providers of news, be it traditional media, such as in the form of newspapers, radio, or television, to position children's issues so that the public in their countries could get to know what is the situation of children and what are their rights that are being violated, what are their rights that are being protected. So on this particular day, we've already evolved from a situation where broadcasters or adult broadcasters are providing news in the situation of children to allowing children to take over the airwaves and to take over the radio waves. So this is your day. International Children's Day of Broadcasting is when children seize control of the airwaves and the radio waves and the traditional print media as well, and progressively more so of online media, to tell your public, to tell your country, what is the situation of children here in the Gambia, what are the things that have been done well, and what are the things that we're still needing to do more of, so that every single child in the country is fully protected. So when you ask me about the mandate of UNICEF, UNICEF was established by the United Nations General Assembly back in 1946 with the sole objective, we only have one objective, which is to work with countries, their national governments, as well as civil society partners, national non-governmental organizations, the private sector, as well as with the media, to ensure that your rights are protected. Your right to education, your right to good health care, your right to good nutrition, your right to being protected from violence, exploitation, and other situations that make you vulnerable. So that, in short, is the mandate of UNICEF. Really, it's to be by your side, working with you and protecting you to ensure that you have a good childhood, a happy childhood, that you are able to fully develop with all of the opportunities that the country provides you. So that's why we're here in the Gambia.
Oh, I
Great
guess the question is answered.
Okay,
Thank you.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
How do you see the media as the pride of children in the Gambia?
Well, look, the media plays a tremendously important role. Even if you go to the landmark Convention on the Rights of the Child, there are several articles that speak to the responsibility of different forms of media to provide information that allows different institutions such as the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Education to better protect your rights. But it also has a mandate and a responsibility to ensure that you as children do not access different types of information or different situations through the media that could be not to your benefit. So for example, there need to be controlled time slots during which children's programming should be prioritized. There should be controlled time slots during which only adult or programming for the adult population ought to be prioritized. So the media plays a tremendously important role to educate the public on what's happening vis-a-vis the situation of children, and also to help to mobilize the population to be much more engaged and much more active in different types of activities. So for example, now when we celebrate on the 6th of March International Children's Day of Broadcasting, the media appeals to the public to become better informed on the situation of children. So the media plays a tremendously important role, and let me congratulate QTV here in the Gambia for finding the time to bring you into their studios so that you can actually, as I said, take control of the airwaves. So great job.
And thank you, UNICEF,
Thank you.
for sponsoring us.
Not at all.
I'll give my co-host to ask the second question.
So, you said about the media contributes to what's happening.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean, like, what's happening?
Well, I'll give you a few examples. So let's say that when we celebrate World Children's Day, which we do every year, or when the different countries celebrate the Day of the African Child, there might be a focus on, let's say, access to education. So what are the key issues that affect the education of children here in the Gambia? So when I refer to what's going on with children, and we take it to that specific example, what's going on with children in education, then we talk about all of the excellent achievements that the country has already been able to obtain in terms of things like ensuring that there's an equal number of girls and boys going to school. That's what we call gender parity, and the Gambia has already been able to achieve gender parity following a very strong push by different government sectors in what we call the agenda of girls' education. But then when we focus more, then we need to look at who are the kids who are not getting to school. Who are the kids who have never been able to get to school? Who are the kids who get to school but for different reasons have to drop out? So that's what I mean with the situation affecting children. UNICEF is a partner to your government and to other institutions in the country to ensure that we get to really know what are the key problems affecting children, be it in the education sector, be it in the health sector, and so on, and to help the government develop plans, policies, and programs so that we reach what we call universal coverage, that every single child is able to get to school, that every single child who gets to school is able to finish school, but with a quality education. So that's what we're trying to do, using only that example of education. Yeah.
What is UNICEF doing to inform children of their rights and responsibilities?
Well, we're doing a lot of things, but specifically we're working much more on we're trying to maybe change the way that we're working here in the Gambia by focusing much more on working directly with children who are involved in children's organizations. So to give you an example, as you know, there's a very strong priority in the country to reduce the percentage of girls who have been subjected to female genital mutilation. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen in terms of communication, social mobilization, advocacy, getting messages out there. So it's impossible to work on issues that affect children without working with children directly. So there are a number of organizations that are out there that are constituted by children, by adolescents, and young people. And our approach is, unless you listen to what children are saying, unless you listen to what their experiences are, unless we lend you an ear for you to tell us what are the priorities and what are the things that are working well, but above all the things that are not working well, then we're not going to be able to achieve policies and programs that really go to the heart of the matter and that are able to resolve some of the situations that you're experiencing. So that's why it's so important to work directly with children, and we advocate that every single organization or institution that has something to do with children needs to start by firstly listening to them, listening to their issues, to their problems, the concerns and challenges.
Thank you so much.
So my third question is that, what is
How
the
many more do you have? I'm ready to be here all day with you. So fire away.
okay? What is your assessment of the status of children in the Gambia since you came into office?
Okay, well, that's a great question. And I've only been here since August of 2020, but I've been with the organization for more than 30 years. I've been able to work in different types of countries, lead in UNICEF programs and developing different sort of interventions with governments across the world. But here in the Gambia, the thing that strikes me the most is that even though from an economical point of view, the Gambia is considered, let's say, a developing country, that it really has made a lot of efforts to use very limited resources to prioritize issues for children. So the Gambia is very well known for the fact that it's already achieved gender parity, so that if you compare it to maybe 20 years ago, there were fewer children going to school and there were significantly fewer girls going to school. Nowadays, that's an issue where there's been a tremendous amount of progress. 30 years ago, there were more children under the age of, very young children who would die before the age of 1 year, before the age of 5 years, because of different types of interventions like vaccination, good nutrition, good maternal and child health care. There are fewer children who are dying before the age of 5 years. So there's been a lot of progress in a lot of areas. However, there's some areas where we believe that there's still a little bit more to do. One thing that we're trying to encourage is that we focus much more on issues of child protection. Protecting children, adolescents and young persons from different forms of violence, which could be physical violence, it could be emotional violence, psychological violence, be it at home, be it in the communities, be it in schools as well. So this is one of the areas that we're trying to really push forward. We have an excellent working relationship with the ministry that you know well, the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Welfare. So that's one of our big priorities. But more importantly is to be able to sustain the achievements that we now have, that we don't slide back in the indicators that are in some areas quite positive. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Lewis, you said you're here for us the whole day. Then I have a question for you. There are laws protecting children in the Gambia, but their implementation is limited. What is UNICEF doing to push for further implementation?
Okay, that's an excellent question because there are a lot of people who are quite concerned about this. So as you know, an excellent and a very complete what we call legal framework. You've got the Children's Act, which is currently under revision. You have a number of different laws and policies that were actually designed to protect the rights of children. And in addition to that, the Gambia has ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So when any country ratifies a Convention on the Rights of the Child, it immediately becomes part and parcel of the legal framework. So even though it's an international human rights instrument, it is a law of the what we call a law of the land. Now the big challenge is that when a lot of these policies, laws and programs are developed with very good intentions, very good objectives, we fall short on trying to identify a clear roadmap for their implementation. And that roadmap needs a couple of things that are fundamental. Number one, financial resources. So in the process of developing the policy, it's fundamental to bring in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs so that we have them on our side to guarantee that the maximum amount of available resources in the countries go to the implementation of those policies. That's one area where we have a shortfall. Another shortfall is in matching the capacity of institutions to the requirements of the policy. So the policy might be very beautiful on paper, and it might be very ambitious on paper, but we don't necessarily go the next step in terms of assessing what do institutions need to do? How do they need to change? How do they need to strengthen themselves in order to be able to implement the policy? And the third issue that I would like to bring up is the fact that many times what happens is that you have a law that exists kind of like in a national vacuum. However, children live in communities, and the communities that they live in are very traditional communities. So many times what we find is a mismatch between the intent and the objective of the law and the way the reality and the experiences of children are at the local level. Now, this is not a phenomenon which is unique to the Gambia. This happens all over the world. These type of assessments and realizations are almost universal. But one of the key opportunities, therefore, is, again, involve you as children, as adolescents, at the point when the policy is being formulated. Because many times what's happened is that the policies are developed in a vacuum. Policies for children, but without consulting you. So that's a tremendous opportunity that we cannot miss out on. Ensuring that when those policies are developed, your experience is listened to establish, well, is this something that's going to work? Well, let's ask the children, do you think it's going to work? And then you can put your voice out there to ensure that the design of that policy, but more importantly, how it's implemented, where you are, where things happen, which is at the family level, at the community level, at the school level, for you to tell us, well, I don't think that's going to work. Well, why don't you think it's going to work? Well, because of these reasons and so on and so forth. So this moment right now, International Children's Day of Broadcasting, is an excellent way for you to get that message out there. Government leaders, policymakers, development specialists, you have to listen to our voices to ensure that the policies that you develop for us have actually been constructed with us and for us.
Okay, we'll now go for a short break. But before we go for the break, thank you, UNICEF, for collaborating with QTV.
Not at all. Thank you. Wonderful job.
Thank
well
you
done.
too.
Thank you. Okay, we're back from our break. Thanks once again, Mr. Lewis.
Not at all.
Say who you can ask.
Yeah. So, according to the Ministry of the Basic and Secondary Education, they have registered significant achievements in educating the girl. What more can be done?
Well, that's a great question, Sehu. We have a wonderful working relationship with Minister Cole and her team. It's a very long-standing historical relationship. We believe that many of the achievements that the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education has been able to produce in the country, we have been fortunate enough to count with the confidence of the minister and her team in UNICEF. So when we're talking about girls' education, I think that there are several issues that the Gambia has done very well. And the reason we have gender parity, and gender parity means an equal number of boys and girls not only attending school, but you need to have parity in each of the classrooms, right? So that's how we define gender parity. As I said, maybe if you look at the statistics 20 to 30 years ago, you would have had a significantly larger number of boys attending school than girls. All right, so we were dealing with a lot of traditional issues regarding, the role of girls in school. They should stay at home. They should be taking care of the family. Mind you, a situation which is not only present here in the Gambia, but we have been fighting this phenomenon throughout most of the African continent. So right now, the leadership of a lot of government partners, especially the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education, but a lot of civil society organizations that push for the girls' empowerment and education movement here in the Gambia. So the one principal reason why we have now achieved gender parity is because there was a very strong commitment by government and civil society to ensure that girls could get to school. One of the things that's happening now, if you go to many schools across the Gambia, you might actually start finding more girls than boys. So it's no longer a situation of gender parity. We're having a situation where insufficient number of boys are going to school. So we need to address the situation, and we're working together with the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education to try to understand why that is. Why is it that all of a sudden we have a situation where we have gone beyond gender parity to have a situation where an insufficient number of boys are going to school? That's one thing. The second thing is that we now need to address not just the number of children who are getting to school, we need to address the number of children who complete school. So as you go from lower basic to upper basic to lower secondary and upper secondary, what you have is a cascade of, say that you had, for example, 100 children enrolling in primary school. The more you go towards secondary level, the more the fewer number of children get there. That's what we call the phenomenon of dropping out. So we have already analyzed many of the factors that lead towards children dropping out from school that we're currently addressing and supporting the ministry to look at. The third problem that we need to look at is that there's a number of children in the country who have never set foot in school. This is what we call out-of-school children. Yeah. And we are working with the ministry to identify the strategies. Who are these children? Where do these children live? Why don't they go to school? And the final issue that is relevant is what we call the learning crisis. So kids get to school, but they're not necessarily learning quality education. And this is a phenomenon that we have identified all throughout the continent. UNICEF calls it learning crisis. The World Bank, for example, calls it a learning poverty situation. So yes, kids get to school, but we need to work much more with how education is delivered to children. So that implies working much more with teachers, addressing the way that teacher colleges across the continent are training teachers, et cetera, the type of support that teachers need to receive in order to be able to receive to deliver a good education to children. So those are some of the challenges that we're working with the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education at the moment.
Do you think that all those problems can be solved?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, imagine if, let's say, 40 years ago, children were never doing what you're doing now, doing International Children's Day of Broadcasting, and we look at what the situation is now. That's an example of how a problem was resolved. Media being so conventional in their approaches that they never thought or ever dreamt of the importance or the opportunity of talking to children. So we always at UNICEF believe that it's important to be an eternal optimist. that if you look at the fact that there are more children going to school now than 30 years ago, that's an example of how a problem can be resolved. If you see the fact that there are fewer children who die before the age of 1 year or 5 years now than compared to 30 years ago, that's an excellent example of how a problem can be resolved. But how do you resolve the problem? You need to understand the problem. You need to understand the causes behind the problem. You need to understand what can help to resolve the problem, and you need to have commitment, and you need to have buy-in. And we believe that all of those issues exist in the Gambia, so that when we're sitting here, maybe not with me, but with another UNICEF representative 10 years or 15 or 20 years down the road, the problems that we've identified today would hopefully have been resolved by then. So
Okay,
it's absolutely possible.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Lewis, we don't have limited time, so before we round up, I have one more question to
Absolutely,
ask.
go ahead.
What counts as success for UNICEF?
That's a tough question, Zainab, but I think we need to simplify it. For us, success means a happy child, a girl and a boy who is born into, grows up, and fully develops himself in a house, in a family that fully loves them and protects them, in a school that fully protects them and educates them, and above all, that you are able to grow into adulthood with all the opportunities that you deserve and that you need to have in order to be able to become productive and engaged adults for your society. So that's how we would define success.
Oh, there you have it.
Okay, Seiko, how's the interview?
It was good, and I learned a lot of things.
Did you? Okay,
Yeah.
well that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Jonathan Lewis.
Well, thank
we
you,
appreciate
Zainab.
it a
Thank
lot.
you, Zahu. Wonderful,
Thank
and
you
congratulations.
so much. Thank you for
Thank
coming,
you.
and we thank UNICEF for
Not at
sponsoring
all.
QTV.
Not at
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well done.